Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think you all know me. I'm Paul Adams from Branston Adams. We're here in the Castle Inn in Farnham, courtesy of New Dawn Pubs, and young Mark may say something at some point. Completely free, we collect money for Phyllis Tuckwell. Young Mike is on the video. Young Naomi and some of the team are supporting. And anybody I've missed out will catch up at the end and we'll have the normal Phyllis Tuckwell announcements. I'm pleased to be joined today by...
Greg Stafford, MP for Farnham and Borden. You didn't introduce me as young though, so I feel a bit offended. Everyone else was young. No, I'm the new Member of Parliament for Farnham and Borden, a new seat created after the boundary changes, and pleased to be here.
Fantastic. So obviously you weren't always in politics.
No.
So let's go from the start. Where were you born?
Where was I born?
Not that you remember it.
No, I don't. I was born in Queen Charlotte's Hospital in West London, but my family are originally all from this neck of the woods. Specifically, my father's family were from Hazelmere, many generations going back in that part of the seat. My mother's family were immigrants after the Second World War. My grandfather from the Ukraine, and obviously after the Second World War, going back to Stalinist Russia was not an option, and having fought for the British here, he was allowed to stay here, and they moved and lived in Whitley, so again, not quite in the seat, but very close. So my parents met at Godalming Grammar School, and so my connection to the seat is historical, and it's a really fabulous place to represent, so I'm very lucky.
And I know there's some business interest on the way, because I vaguely remember a sweet shop.
Yes, so my grandparents and my great-grandparents ran a sweet shop in Hazelmere originally called Stafford's, and it ran until the early 2000s. And actually, what's been really nice is coming back to Hazelmere, how many people remember my grandparents and my father and his brother. And well, I knew my grandmother very well, but my grandfather actually died when I was 3 months old, so I never really knew him. And to hear stories about him was really fascinating, especially about, in terms of character-wise, how similar he was to my father. And the sarcastic, acerbic wit of my father clearly was something he'd inherited from his father. I hope I'm a little bit more, I'm sort of less acerbic, but that's something there. But so small business has always been something that's been in my family's. As I say, on my other parents' side, my grandfather started a small optical factory making lenses after the Second World War. So again, a lot about small businesses have been in the family for a long time. And retail. My father worked for Marks & Spencer for many, many years.
Fantastic. So obviously you grew up locally, went to school, presumably went to school, went to university, started a career in...
Yes, so I was actually born and brought up in West London. So that's where I was and that's where I went to school. But obviously came here a lot to see my grandparents, especially during the summer months. I went to Oxford University, studied, supposedly it said history on the exam papers. I'm not sure I did a vast amount of actual studying, which isn't something I recommend when I go to speak at schools. Work really hard, it's really important. And then I did a degree in history, as I said, but I ended up working in healthcare. And over my career, before I became a Member of Parliament, I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry, I've worked in the charitable sector, in the regulatory sector. I worked for the General Dental Council regulating dentists, worked for some of the professional bodies, and then for the last 7-8 years before I became a Member of Parliament, I actually worked in the NHS itself, in NHS England, running a programme called the Federation of Specialist Hospitals, which is a grouping of all the single specialty hospitals in the country, like Moorfields Eye Hospital, the Royal Brompton, the Royal Marsden, Clatterbridge Cancer Centre, anywhere that does one thing, as opposed to the big teaching hospitals. And as part of that, what we tried to do was take the best practice from those hospitals and disseminate it out to the local district general hospitals like Frimley, like Royal Surrey, Basingstoke, etc. And I employed 60 to 70 of the top clinicians in the country to go out and try and make those reforms, because what we found quite obviously is that if someone like me with no medical background goes and tells a surgeon that they're not doing things very well, they essentially put two fingers up at me and say, what do you know? Quite rightly. Whereas if you employ peer-to-peer, that really works. And we were very, very focused on clinical improvement. It's all about clinical improvement and patient focus. But if you do things clinically better, then you save money, because you reduce infection rate, you reduce readmission. God forbid if something goes wrong, you reduce litigation. So in the last 3 or 4 years, we saved the NHS about £3 billion. Drop in the ocean in the NHS budget, but it does just show that you can make efficiencies in the NHS without major reorganisations or cutting services. And something that's really, one of the things that fired me up to being wanted to be an MP was this idea that actually we can and we're going to have to reform the NHS. We simply cannot, it cannot just run as it always has done. We've got a massively ageing population with much more complicated needs, and we've got a diminishing birth rate, i.e. the people who are going to pay for this. So we have to have an honest conversation with the public about how we're going to provide, fund and deliver healthcare and social care in this country. And I feel with my background in healthcare, hopefully I've got something to add to that conversation.
Fantastic. Let's go sideways just for a few moments. Because obviously you're wearing a wedding ring, so I'm assuming...
I am, yes.
I'm assuming that life events were going on around you whilst you were inexorably, I can't even say that word, moving towards being an MP.
Yes. I mean, I'm not entirely seeing the connection between being married and an MP, and I don't think you definitely don't need to be married to be an member of Parliament. But yes, no, I married my wife Caroline 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago now. We've got two small children, Susanna and Lucy, who are 8 and 6. So they keep me extraordinarily busy as well, and to be frank, extraordinarily grounded because. Hopefully I haven't got to the point yet where I feel I'm some sort of massively important person, but when a child tells you that you're fat or that you want all those wrinkles on your face, Daddy, it really does bring you back down to earth. So, and it's great fun. So, no, I met my wife actually at a wedding, so I've escaped having to do anything on an app, which I think if those people who have to do that these days, I think that's really quite difficult. So I was lucky to meet in a sort of traditional way.
Excellent. So obviously, to become an MP, you must have made a decision, and you touched on it already, in that you were working in the NHS, and presumably you want to make differences. So, I mean, you touched on the NHS, what are the key differences you'd like to make?
Yes, so I think it's not an overnight decision or a light switch moment where you go, well, I suddenly want to be a member of Parliament. I've been a local councillor for 17 years up to it, so I've been involved in politics a long time. But I really felt that there were some key things that I thought we need to change. One was around how we deal with health and social care. Two was, I think, and we may touch on this later, around defence and security in this country. I'm 42. I was born 2-3 months after the Falklands War. Trying to talk to people of my generation and younger about the existential threat of Russia, of China, of Iran, of North Korea is really, really difficult. But I think we are in a really, really dangerous place at the moment. I don't think it's hyperbole to say we're in a pre-war period. I think things are going to have to come to a head in the next few years. And to try and get people to understand why we're going to need to spend 2.5% to 3% of our GDP, perhaps even more, on defence, when people look and go, well, our roads are rubbish, the NHS is collapsing, etc., is a really, really hard sell. But I think that's something that we are going to have to sell. And the third one, I think, you touched on before, is around business. I think we have forgotten, and I say this, definitely the current Labour government, but even us as Conservatives previously, have forgotten how important business is to driving the economy, to ensuring that it's the productive part of the economy that's going to pay for all the things that offence the NHS, the social care. And so the things I really want to change, on that front, is to really remember how can we support business, how can we reduce tax for business, how can we make this a place that business wants to thrive, entrepreneurs want to invest in, and external companies from abroad want to invest in. And I feel like in the first 3 months, not that it's all about me, have singularly failed to do that, because I think what we've seen in the budget has been pretty much the opposite of that. But those are hopefully over the next 5 years the three things that I can focus on.
Fantastic. We'll come back to some of those. So obviously you've got a new constituency. Congratulations on being elected as our Member of Parliament.
Well, thank you. Or some of you, anyway, I assume.
I think everybody voted for you in this
room. No, I'm sure that's not the case. If everyone told me they voted for me, I'd have won by a lot more, I can tell you.
How have you found it so far? Because obviously it's a career change. It's a big change in all that you do.
Yes, I mean, obviously you come into it with your eyes open, so you have some understanding of what the job's going to entail. But there's plenty that you don't understand or you don't fully realise. I mean, I think it's very interesting because it's quite schizophrenic, because you spend Monday to Thursday, usually, sometimes Friday, in Westminster, dealing with generally relatively, inverted commas, high politics things. This week we've been discussing the budget, big issues. We talked about, there's been a statement yesterday on small boats, et cetera, et cetera. And then sort of Friday and Saturday, and maybe Sunday, if I can persuade my wife to let me work on Sundays as well, is sort of the much more local community-focused things. And that's quite an interesting thing to square. I mean, the other interesting thing for this seat is obviously the cross-border nature of this new seat. So it's 2/3 of it's in Surrey, a third of it's in Hampshire, which makes it more complicated because I've got to deal with 2 sets of local authorities, 2 police forces, umpteen number of NHS trusts, which someone who would just have a seat that's all within a single authority doesn't have to deal with. But I actually think having somebody who crosses that border is helpful. And as I was saying to you before we started this chat, I think the connectivity, both the physical connectivity and the sort of merging of between Farnham and Borden, and indeed the other towns, Hazelmere and Liphook, I think is really important, because I think Borden is only going to thrive if Farnham thrives, and vice versa, actually, I think, going forward. And the problems that are being created, let's say, by the vast amount of house building that's going on around in the area is only going to be solved if we look at it as a whole, rather than say, well, we're all Borden people, so we don't care about what's going on in Farnham, or vice versa. So I think that's part of it. But the job is fascinating. The hours are weird. On Mondays we don't start till 2:30 in the house, excuse me, and go on till 10, 11 at night. Whereas on a Thursday we're not sitting today because it's recess, but so we start at 9:30 and go on till 7:30. What you don't know, though, is how you can plan your day. So you have a schedule of the day. You usually know the week before roughly what the debates in the House are going to be, the questions are going to be, but you don't know when you're going to be called. So you might start a debate on something at 12:30 in the afternoon, and you know you're down on the list to speak, but you don't know whether you're going to be called at 12:32 or at 7 o'clock. And you cannot leave the chamber until you have been called. You can pop out maybe to go to the loo for a minute if you ask the Speaker nicely, but essentially you're stuck there potentially for 5 hours or so if you're being called last. And as a new Member of Parliament, I'm pretty much down the pecking order of where the Speaker calls people. So that can really change your day. Or suddenly you can be called and then you've got an afternoon free. So it's quite difficult to, if you want to be active for constituents, which I hope you'd want me to be, in the chamber, asking questions, raising points, speaking in debates, it's very difficult to sort of plan a day because you don't really know when and how you're going to be called. So that's just a bit of an insight into how things work.
Let's go back to defence budget. My father was in the army, and the defence budget has been eroded beyond belief over years. And you've got some Ukrainian heritage, and we've got war in Ukraine. Where do you think this is going to go? Because similar to you, we're on a turning point, and you may want to sort of bring in the fact that Mr. Trump managed to get himself re-elected. Yeah. And it's like I fully accept it's like having a crystal ball. But what would your crystal ball tell you?
Well, I mean, it's really difficult. I think, obviously, this area has a big, rich military history. We're just across the border from Aldershot. Borden was a military town until 2015. Obviously, lots of still service personnel living in the area. So I think there is a big connection here. And also, I mean, whilst I agree with you that the defence budget has been eroded over many, many years, it's sort of understandable why. Because we hadn't, we'd had small conflicts, but generally ones that, to be frank, we went in, made a big effort, and, inverted commas, won. Perhaps not did the long-term stuff afterwards, but essentially America and Britain went in and we won things. I think this is the first war where it's not obvious that, it's not at all obvious, that what winning looks like and how we as the Western powers would win it. I think Ukraine is fundamental, not just to the obvious point that Ukraine should be able to self-determine and defend its borders, but how it interconnects with everything else. I mean, China is watching the conflict like a hawk. It's already made its stated aim that it's going to invade Taiwan at some point. I think if we resile from helping Ukraine and allow Russia to hold the territory that it currently holds, or even encroach further, I think China will see that as an absolute green flag to invade Taiwan. And obviously, if people think we've had spikes in prices because of the oil and food problems we have from Ukraine, once China controls 75% of the world's microchips, I think then we will really see a real problem in terms of trade and costs, and that doesn't even bear thinking about. Clearly, the election of Donald Trump, we have no idea what Trump is going to do. I don't think we should in any way believe that the Donald Trump that we're going to get this time is the same Donald Trump as we got last time. I don't think we should believe that what he said is necessarily what he's going to do. He's a completely unknown factor, I think. The one thing we do know about him, he's very, very personality based. So it's not policy, it's not rhetoric, it's not some sort of gut instinct or philosophy about how he deals with things. It's very personality based. If he likes the person, he's friendly to them. If he doesn't like the person, then it isn't. So I think it's really essential for us in Britain, as probably the strongest, perhaps with France, who has the strongest connection with America. It's so essential for us to have a good working relationship with Donald Trump, and that's on things like we're just talking, but also on trade, because he's talked about potentially putting up tariffs on various goods and services. So I think having whether we personally like him or not, having a good relationship with his administration is essential. Fantastic.
Let's come home, because obviously we had the first budget of the new Parliament, which we touched on. I'm an accountant, and I look at the budget and look at what happens 2 years down the line. What are your feelings, and what do you think should have been done, and is there anything that you would have changed?
Well, I probably would have changed most of it, to be brutally frank. I mean, I think it's not surprising, because and I'm trying not to be too party political here, but I am obviously a party political politician. I think it's just we've reverted to the same old type of Labour, which is borrow, tax and spend without really thinking about what are the long-term impacts or the unintended consequences of what we're going to do. So national insurance rises. One, let's not worry about whether that was a breach of their manifesto, but the reality is it's really going to hit business, and it's really going to hit workers, and it's going to hurt people in their pockets. And again, talking about, well, as I said earlier, we want to be encouraging the productive bits of our society rather than punishing them. So I think that I think to me that's crazy. I think some of the other unintended consequences, VAT on independent schools, to me is simply a class warfare tax. The reality is it's probably not going to raise very much money. It's going to close independent schools. It's going to have a massive impact on special educational needs, because you've got places like Morehouse just down the road. 60% of their pupils are on what they call EHCPs, which is essentially funded by the local authority. 40% aren't. What will happen is those 40% will immediately switch over to EHCPs, which will have a massive impact on budgets, already massively stretched budgets in local authorities. But it will take a year or so some of those people won't be able to afford it during that time and will fall out of the system. Massive influx onto the state system, especially in the Send area, which has a much more restricted area. So I think that's a really big problem. Winter fuel, again, not going to raise a vast amount of money, but there are some pensioners who are really going to suffer from that. Of course, there are lots of rich pensioners who don't need it, but there are also a lot of poor pensioners who don't meet the pension credit threshold. I had someone write to me only yesterday, I think it was, who was literally £2 above the threshold, and she's caring for her husband who's got, I think it was Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. And she's devastated, because perhaps to some of us in this room, £200-300 a year is not a vast amount of money, but to her it's absolutely critical. And so I think there are some really big things. I mean, there are probably not many farmers in the room, I don't know, but the changes to inheritance for farms, again, Labour talks about wanting food security, being more self-reliant, and then it essentially is going to carve up farms. It just makes no sense to me, any of this, other than we feel we need to raise X amount of money, so therefore we need to tax people to get that money. There seems to be no more thought to it than that.
I'm allowed to be more political than you, because my analysis is about 2.5 years down the line, if we don't have a period of sustained growth, are they going to run out of cash? And so can you come back in 2.5 years?
Well, they will do, and then that will be the ever going cycle, where they'll need more and more money to plug the holes, because we won't see the growth. And the OBR's own indicators show that growth is going to will be slower than what it was predicting under the last government. It's also predicting that inflation is going to go up again, going to hurt people in the pockets. So, and obviously inflation hits all parts of the economy, including the government. So things are going to cost more for the government. So it's going to have to raise more money. And but 'twas ever thus. Sorry.
Sorry, we should reconvene.
I voted against all the measures last night, so you can't blame me.
We should reconvene this in 2.5 years and then see
whether I was right or not. Yeah.
Let's bring it back this way a little bit. Your local MP, you're out and about in the constituency, and you've got some initiatives to go and see people, haven't you?
Yes.
So do you want to share? I mean, Sainsbury's and I think you're talking to Waitrose.
Oh yes, so you're talking about surgery. So I mean, I think it's really important to be as visible as possible, and that's like coming to these events. It's making sure that I'm going to see businesses, and if you want, I know I'm inviting myself to your business, but if there's something you feel I can do or promote, I'm really keen to do so with small businesses. But also, it's about holding the surgeries to ensure that people can communicate with me. Now, to be frank, a lot of people don't want to wait to come and not even want, don't take a personal offence at this, want to come and see me personally to tell me their problem. They want things to be done. So the amount of emails that I get, I think, Molly's my team here somewhere, but I mean, I think we get in something of the order of 200 or so emails a day from people. So that's how people want to communicate. But actually, still there are some people who want to. So I hold regular surgeries. I try and move them about the constituency, but I hold a lot of them at our office in Hindhead as well, which is sort of central to the constituency, so that's quite helpful. But also trying to go out into shops as well to have what I just call shopping centre surgeries where no one's booked in, but people can come and just see me. So hopefully we can start one in Waitrose, as I was saying earlier here, again just so that people can drop in and hopefully occasionally tell me about some good news, but most of the time raise the issues that they have, and hopefully I can try and solve them. But generally, this part of the world doesn't have too many problems and issues, but there are still some that need to be resolved.
Fantastic. You've mentioned that. How do we get hold of you? If any of these people are too shy to ask you a question later.
Well, actually, someone messaged me recently and said, "Oh, I saw you on Downing Street, but I didn't want to come and say and bother you." Actually, but if you see me on the street, do come and bother me. I really don't mind. I mean, unless I'm telling my children off about something, but do come and say hello or something like that. Even if I don't or can't deal with your problem there on the street, I can drop you a line. But you can drop me a line, which is. I'm seeing you all writing it down. greg.stafford.mp@parliament.uk. You can write to me either at the House of Commons or at our Hindhead office. You can ring me again on those on the numbers there. If you go on my website, just type Greg Stafford MP into Google, you'll find it, and all my contact details are there. And I've got a really good team who will pick that up and make sure. But I see everything that goes in and out as well, so I make sure that I'm on top of that.
Fantastic. I'm getting towards the end, and I'm sure there's going to be questions. What does the future hold for Greg Stafford and Greg Stafford MP?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, as a new Member of Parliament, my real focus is, and to be frank, a new Member of Parliament on a relatively thin majority, though, given the state of the election, not too bad compared to some of my colleagues. My view is that I need to spend the next 4 or 5 years, really winning the trust of the thousands of people who didn't vote for me last time, and hopefully reassuring those who did. So my focus is going to be very, very constituency focused. But I'm on the Health Select Committee, and I've just got elected to that. I feel that will be one of the ways I can perhaps start pushing some of the agenda that I was talking about earlier. So that's my ambition. I haven't, my phone's in my pocket, I haven't received a call from Kemi yet to join the front bench. I think it's unlikely that I will get that call as a new Member of Parliament. But I'm keen to work hard locally, raise the issues, deal with the issues locally and raise them in Parliament. Hopefully we can make Farnham and Borden even better than it already is.
Okay, well, let's thank you for what you've done so far.
Thank you. I also feel my phone is extraordinarily warm, so it must be doing something to me. I can feel it's roasting my chest.
Do you have any questions for this young man? I knew Emma would start.
Young man, you've done it now, well done.
I've got a couple, I'm going to start with one that's not party political. So
right.
I just was interested to know what became of the sweet shop. What was its demise?
Oh, well, it essentially closed when my grandmother, sort of got into her, when she ran it long past retirement or normal sort of retirement age, but eventually it became too much for her on her own, and she closed it. And essentially it was sort of two houses brought together, and she moved into the smaller side, and then she sold the house and it became residential. And then when she died, the other bit was sold. In fact, actually, there is a lovely lady who lived there, and she lives there now, and she invited me in for a cup of tea, and it was interesting to see, the house, most of which I remember, but obviously the shop front bit now being her living room, her front room. So that's what's happened to it now. So I'm afraid.
Many businesses used to have, in the front rooms of houses.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'd be lovely. It would be lovely if it carried on as a shop, but I don't think that kind of small sweet shop. God forbid the word these days, tobacconist as it was, newspapers, cards, etc. Snoopy. For some reason, I never really understood why, Snoopy was the big thing, as you know, the cartoon dog. Sold loads of Snoopy stuff. No idea why, but that was so. If you want your Snoopy stuff, you can't go to Hazelmere anymore, I'm afraid.
And what do you think of your new boss?
Really, really, really pleased, actually. I think she's got the ambition, she's got the fire, she's got some good ideas. And I think, people, if anyone watched Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, I really think she's exposed the fact that Keir Starmer doesn't answer any questions on anything. And I've said to her, we had a brief chat last night during the votes. I said to her, keep doing that, because I think, to be frank, the only bit that the public ever sees of politicians is that few clips on the news from Prime Minister's Questions, and that is the point where we can expose the fact that, in my view, Keir Starmer doesn't have the answers to questions and is going down the wrong track. But I think she's going to be a breath of fresh air, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Who's at the back? Oh, it's young Clive. Young Clive.
Oh yes, good.
Given you're in the opposition and they have a significant majority, how much influence and how much cross-party working is there that you can actually have a voice, or are you really just waiting till next election?
Well, to be honest with you, I think there is an element of that. We are not going to win any votes in Parliament, so that's not going to happen. There are 120 of us, 121 of us. Occasionally the Lib Dems vote with us. 72 of them, a few of the minor parties. I would say that currently, and I'm going to be very nakedly party political now, currently the Lib Dems act as if they're the opposition to the opposition. They don't seem to have worked out the Labour's in government, but I think eventually they will, and will turn their focus to the new government. But there are opportunities for cross-party working. For example, the select committees, I think, is an area that where we can make a difference, because those are cross-party. And certainly we've had 2 meetings of the Health Select Committee thus far. I'm encouraged that whilst we don't agree on everything, I think there are shared ambitions that I think we can work together and hopefully influence policy that way. There are other things actually where a lot of it's about relationship building. So it's been really interesting. I've just joined the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, which is an opportunity for members of Parliament to go and get embedded with various different parts of the armed forces, and that's cross-party. And we were at Shrivenham, the Defence Academy, last week, and it was actually really nice to meet members of Parliament from other parties in a non-aggressively political setting where we could have chats about things that interested us. And you actually find, unsurprisingly, that we have lots of things that we're interested in common that we want to do. So I think some of those unofficial channels will be helpful. But the reality is the government has its programme. With the majority that it's got, it's not going to lose any votes unless it brings something so controversial that a significant number of its backbenchers vote against it. But we saw, even with something like winter fuel, where clearly the Labour benches weren't happy with it, the best we got was 50 or so of them abstaining rather than voting against it. So in reality, the government is going to get its programme through for the next 5 years. What we can do as the opposition is, one, try and temper some of that if we think it's wrong, and hopefully demonstrate to the public that how we would do things differently / better.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, very thank you. Lovely to see you, Greg. Thank you very much. I like your 3 kind of focus areas of health and defence and business. On the business side of things, I've kind of run and scaled SMEs basically for decades, and I'm just wondering, in opposition, I suppose I'm seeing a huge change, a huge shift. Artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain, various different technologies. That if I fast forward 5 years, never mind the 2.5, eventually, I think it's going to be so radically different. I've never seen change as fast as I was part of the whole .com thing back in the 90s and various things in between. And was involved with Kevin Hollenreich, the MP for small businesses, and did some stuff with Number 10 Down, Lord Petty Gas, etc. But it seemed there was a head of steam being built up, and it seems like it's all just stopped. And so, in opposition, what do you think can be done, if anything, to try and get that going again? Well, one of the things that I heard was that French small businesses are adopting AI faster, significantly faster than British small businesses. Now, someone who came over from Ireland, I find the antipathy between French and the British quite funny, but nonetheless, it is true, and that AI is not being adopted fast enough, perhaps, or being given the focus.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the last government really saw the potential of AI, and indeed the potential for pitfalls, but wanted to be on the leading edge of AI. And I see it in my own work in healthcare. Some of the stuff that now, one of the last things I was looking at just before I became a Member of Parliament, was some AI that looked at a certain type of retinal cancer, can spot the retinal cancer far better than the clinician can. And those are the kind of things, even before you get into how AI deals with administration, etc., and make business run. So I think it clearly hasn't been a focus for the new government. I'm not quite sure why, because again, in terms of increasing our productivity, there are some you can make workers work harder, but really that's not how we're going to increase productivity. It's going to be through technology, and so I would have hoped that they'd be embracing it, but I don't think they are. I think what can we do in opposition? Well, I don't think that that desire to put AI at the forefront has disappeared from our party, and I know that there's an all-party group on AI that we lead. I know it's really big focus for Andrew Griffiths, who's just become the shadow business secretary, and he's obviously joins our constituency. He's our North and South Downs, so he meets us at the sort of Hazelmere Liphook end of the constituency, and I know he's very focused on that. So it'll still be high on our agenda, and all I can hope is that we can persuade the government to push it up theirs.
Well, I do think most of the businesses in the UK are small businesses,
Yeah.
and they always find a way. So when it's the right time, they will adopt it anyway, regardless of what's going on.
I'm sure they will, but it's about whether it's what we'd want. I would hope is homegrown technology here that both because it's getting back to security, having our own developed stuff is important, but that industry will create jobs in itself, and I think if we are behind the curve, not just in adoption, but actually in technology improvements and R&D and development, then I think we're going to miss the boat on it. And I think that's a shame, because we were at the leading edge up till recently.
Yeah,
I think a kind of a hybrid kind of technology needs to be brought together rather than just let AI deal with it, because AI forgot to shut the door at a component factory that I know about, and 500,000 components when being machined, because the temperature dropped, the calibration was out. But if a human was actually there dealing with it,
I'm sorry. I'm not suggesting that we enter some sort of Terminator world where where Skynet controls everything. That's a really old cultural reference. But so obviously you've got to have the humans here. But it's about and there are some real pitfalls and dangers in AI, and we need to be really careful with it. But if we are not if we're not at the forefront of looking about how we can use it, and indeed put in the safeguards, then I think others are going to do it to us. And you talked about France, but to be frank, it's not going to be the French who deal with this. It's going to be the Chinese. It's going to be people who are not friendly to us who are running this organisation.
Yeah, there's another question, young Mark.
Sorry, very strange being called young all the time.
Sorry, it's one of my things, as you know.
Greg, thanks for coming this morning. I think it's great to see you out and about, and much appreciated. I am really pleased to hear that one of your key priorities is around business. Personally, I really think the Tories lost their way.
I don't disagree.
I think they, what the Tories have perhaps done relatively well pre the last few years is they've really encouraged entrepreneurs in the country. They've put schemes and initiatives there that have really driven growth. And I think the wind has been sucked out of those sails quite a lot in the last 5 years. And I think the incentive for entrepreneurs to really build economic growth, to drive business, to scale businesses, I think is just not there at the moment, and we know that won't happen under Labour. So I think that should be a real priority, especially when Kemi is out looking at what her key policy should be over the next few years. I just want to make a point on the budget and ask for a bit of support from you. I've been in the pub industry for 20 years. I chair the biggest trade body in the pub industry, which is based just up the road in Fleet. And I'm on the sort of latter end of my career, if you like, in pubs and just run and own 3 now. So our business turns over sort of 4.5–5 million quid. The budget will cost us about £260,000. That's the direct cost into my business. Running 3 pubs, which is not proportionate in terms of our revenue and our profitability, and and that's mainly through about 40k on business rates, about 40–50k on the NI changes, both the threshold and the rate change, but also on minimum wage. That's the biggest part, and I support minimum wage, but minimum wage has gone up 47% in 5 years, and that is not sustainable for retail and hospitality, where we need a lot of people, and I assume also the fact that they're getting rid of the taper. So essentially, I mean, why would anybody now employ someone, the young people, an inexperienced young person, when they're going to have to pay them exactly the same as an experienced? It's nonsense. Rachel Reeves set out that she wants 18-year-olds to be earning on the same minimum wage as people at above 21, which for me is a daft policy. I really don't understand the logic behind that. Where I would like a bit of support from you, if possible, is. I know you've already spoken to the Hollybush, and I think it was on one of the select committees I saw you ask a question. It was a Westminster Hall debate, yes. Which is fantastic. I'd like to put together a little group of local publicans, landlords that are in our trade, and I'd like them to be able to meet with you on a regular-ish basis to really feed in what the challenges are, because I think the pub industry particularly is on an absolute knife edge at the moment. They've been on a knife edge for the last few years, and we are going to see mass failures in the country, and I don't think consumers really understand the perilous position that a lot of pubs are in, and particularly in this area because it is a bit more affluent, but other areas of the country, we've got the trade body I chair has got a membership of about 13,000 across the UK, and there's some people in there that are really struggling with a big My Pub campaign. So I'm really asking for your support on that, and to perhaps get a little bit more involved with the My Pub initiative that the BII that I represent is driving to try and influence policy and raise awareness on that side. Yeah, I mean, I concur with everything you've said in terms of the budget, in terms of the pressures that you've had. As you say, I spoke to the Hollybush, I've spoken to other pubs in the area as well. I'm very happy to be part of that, and I'd be very willing. And I would say that in Parliament there is what's the right word? There is general support for the pub industry, but very little action to actually demonstrate that. And I think if anything I can do to help with that and push forward, I will be very happy to do so. So very happy to meet with you or a grouping regularly to discuss that. And indeed any other business that feels, or grouping of businesses that feel that but my input or giving me more information on things, I'd be very happy to do, because I can't claim to be an expert in every industry, in every part of policy. So I need your help to tell me what are the key messages, what are the key points, what are the key problems. So please don't be shy in coming forward to let me know where there are problems and how you think I might be able to help you. Yeah, and that's my point. I want you to have the knowledge from firsthand from people that are at the coalface of the pub industry of
Yeah.
what is really hurting them at the
Yeah.
moment. And so you're armed with that information
Yeah.
to at least help try and influence.
Very, very happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Liv. She's young as well.
Young Liv.
Lovely.
You've got with the programme.
Look at that. I'm only ever so slightly under 40, so I'm all right. Congratulations on the post.
Thank you very much.
I actually feel for you massively and your team. So I watched my mum be in Parliament for the last 45 odd years. Her last MP was actually Craig McKinley, and she's worked for the likes of David Lightbound, John Redwood, and I grew up running around House Park, Commons, with Bojo and David Cameron, right?
You probably know more about it than I do then, so maybe you should be sitting here. Should we swap?
I did say some rather expletives to David Cameron a long time ago when my ex-husband was in Afghan. So, I understand and feel for you and your team because you'll be working on case studies upon case studies. And I just wanted to pick up on something, and I'm sure it's probably felt around the room and you've touched on it yourself, but local businesses and where you are in your constituency, I think for me it would be good for you to see value in returning that by being present in your constituency. For watching, my dad's a local councillor, he's very active in his area. My mum used to produce and make her MPs go into surgeries on a regular basis to make the constituency realise that those MPs were very visual and very known. And I think if you're able to do that and work with like the likes of you guys doing the pub industries and local industries, you will see that you will grab the attention of your constituents, and they will get behind you naturally and start supporting you. I think the Tories have lost their way a little bit. I'm sure to not go over our ground, you've done that. You accept that. But I just think for you as a new MP coming into it, and yes, the cross border is going to be a fun time for you and your team. It will certainly do you some good to certainly spend some time in your constituency and be visual with that.
Well, I don't know whether the implication of your question is you're suggesting I haven't been.
No,
but,
I'm not. Sorry,
I don't know. I was, but you're absolutely right. I think the danger comes when a member of Parliament forgets who puts them into Parliament,
Correct.
and I can see how it's very. I think if you don't keep yourself grounded in that way, it's very easy to be sucked both into Parliament as a place, as in physically sucked there, but also in terms of your outlook, in that you very much become, you sort of almost, I can see, not necessarily colleagues on our side because there aren't many of them left, but members of Parliament who very much have lost touch with the people who elect them. I've tried since I've been elected, and indeed before I've been elected, to be here as much as physically here as much as possible. I spend all Fridays, all Saturdays here, Monday mornings as well when I can. I come to things on Sundays if my wife really lets me do that. I do occasionally have to see my family, so I do that. But if you want to know what I'm doing, this is my plug this way. Sign up to my newsletter, which is weekly. It will tell you. You'll probably be bored with it after about 3 weeks, but it tells you everything I've been doing, both in Parliament and in the constituency that week. I've had pretty good feedback from it. There's about 2,000 people who are currently subscribed to it, but obviously there are 70,000 electors, 73,000 electors in this constituency. So I'm very keen for people to sign up for that. And it's also a good way of saying, Greg's, for example, let's say, visited 4 pubs over the last for the last 4 weeks I've seen, but he hasn't seemed to visit a supermarket or my shop. So maybe I should get in touch with him and say, actually, Greg, why don't you come to my supermarket or to my shop or something? So it's a good way of seeing both what I am doing and what perhaps you feel that I'm not doing. So please do sign up for that. Again, just drop me an email and we can put you on that, and encourage anybody else to sign up to it, please as well.
He's young Ian.
Young Ian.
Yeah.
Now we're really thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
You started at the beginning with quite a clear statement about defence, saying we need to increase spending, we need to change the posture. it seems to be the subject that's not talked about at the moment. We've got General Rowley Walker saying we've got a double combat power in the next 3 years, triple it by the end of the decade. We've got senior members of the MOD and the armed forces saying we need to be prepared for war with Russia by sort of late 2028. And yet the debate isn't happening. People aren't getting hold of that. I had with your form, well, you didn't quite overlap. Randall Jarrow-Medina, the MP for my MP, until the last election, who I get on with very well. But I had a bit of a grumble at him when we debated this with him, and he said the time is not right. He said we can't raise in Parliament and in government the need to increase defence spending, to increase posture, because public opinion isn't interested in it yet. And I said, well, we need to get public opinion interested, because if that had been the attitude in 1938, we would have lost the World War II. So you can't win votes, get that, but what can you do to help shape the opinion and get people thinking about it and really understand?
I mean, I've known Randall for years as well, so I'm actually quite surprised that's what he said to you. I'm not doubting he said it to you, but I'm surprised given what I know about him, and I think he's wrong. I think he was wrong if that's what he did say.
That may have been a slip of the tongue.
No. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not doubting. I'm just saying that, knowing as I always thought he was relatively strong on defence, but maybe he wasn't. As I said, I think it's. I think where he is right is that it is a really hard sell, and I think I mentioned that earlier. It is a really hard sell. What I try to do is try to make sure that I'm raising the issues in Parliament, and again, then feeding that back through my email, through talking to people about the real importance of it. There's. I had someone who did something on Twitter, I think it was in the last couple of days, and essentially there's someone, like, it's a no-named person on Twitter, one of these people, and he said, "Oh, there's Greg Stafford talking about defence, but rather than what matters to his constituents in Farnham and Borden." And I was like, well, actually, defence matters extraordinarily important to every person in this country. So it is trying to, don't get me wrong, I want to talk about potholes and the Farnham infrastructure programme and speeding and the NHS and everything else, but we can't pretend that that defence and security is something that happens for other people, with other people, by other people somewhere over there. It's going to be a massive impact, even if we are not physically going to be conscripted and sent to the Eastern Front. The reality is, if we have a major war, it's going to affect everybody's lives, and especially a war, if we lose it, will affect everybody's lives. And so all I can say to you is I'm just going to keep raising it, keep fighting for it, keep pushing it. And I think actually one of the few benefits of opposition is that we have the freedom to be able to talk about those things unrestricted by the kind of civil service purse string attitude that understandably ministers get kind of captured by. So that's what we'll be doing.
I'm fairly impressed that you got the Farnham infrastructure plan, the FIP, and speeding into the same sentence.
Well, yes. Well, I can see. Well, I only get 2 sets of emails about Castle Street. One telling me how it's always blocked, and the other one telling me how everyone's going too fast down it. So and given that I live just off Castle Street, I do understand that at different times of the day that isn't as strange as it seems. Half the time you are completely stuck in a traffic jam, and half the time you're watching the cars go past at 70. So it is a problem. But I don't know whether the infrastructure plan will actually solve that problem. But hopefully it will bring some improvement.
I think there's a question behind the light, and I can't see who it is.
Oh, sorry.
Old Stephen.
Oh, Stephen.
Everyone else is young, so first of all, I'd like to completely agree with your. I'm a member of ex-forces, so I completely agree with what you said about defence. It takes no time at all to deplete it. I'm afraid the last government did.
Yep, I agree.
And it takes a huge amount of effort and time to build up again.
Yeah.
And so keep on doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Second thing is probably a bit of a message, but also just your views. From a business point of view, it's really hard to make decisions when the political situation is like a magic mix. It's one of the reasons I didn't vote. So I think a key thing, message I would like to give, is that although we've got Labour in the budget, we don't necessarily bits of it which we don't like. It's not great for business. However, stability is not to be underestimated, because at least once we've worked out how we're going to get through this and we get through it, we're able to plan, and we're able to make long-term planning financially. So I'm currently in a green startup, in a startup around green chemicals. Low carbon is a better way of putting it. Low carbon chemicals, etc. It's a breath of relief now to see that we've got a stable government. As you say, it's not. Star was here to stay for 5 years.
Yes, I agree.
And those are the kind of horizons which we can do plan. So if you could take that message back, please, and I've lost count of how many leaders actually now in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yes. Yes, I mean, I'm not going to even try to defend the sort of carnage, especially in the last probably 2 or 3 years of the last government. It was unacceptable, and quite rightly, the electorate punished us for it, absolutely. What I would say is, maybe because of the small numbers or who did and didn't get elected from the Conservatives, I think that reality has really hit home. I think that with a new leader, that stability is there, and I don't think there's anybody now, certainly in the parliamentary party, who feels that it's going to be a good idea to stir things up. And I think, I genuinely believe that hopefully if we get back into government in 5 years' time, you will see a very different Conservative Party in terms of its purpose, cohesion and stability, to use your word.
And I think you also need to address the Europe question, because what we've got right now, small businesses can't really export to Europe anymore. And that is not acceptable. That's the damage that's caused. Okay, it's tiny, but you add that up, that's a lot of stuff.
Yes, it will be interesting.
You've got to just decide. There's got to be some form of agreement, some form of trade agreement, and around the ability, and it's going to involve some compromise. But to have it as an ideology is not acceptable, because that's what's happened.
Yes, I mean, I think.
And I'm not resisting. I realise you haven't been part of this.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not in any way trying to weasel out of answering any questions. I'm just trying to think of the best way to answer it. I think all I don't have, talking to you said, a crystal ball. So I don't quite know where we'll be in 5 years' time in terms of any trading relationships. And I don't know. I mean, Labour have said that they want to do something, but again, I'm not sure what that is, and if it will have happened by the time. Hopefully we get back into power. But I think you're absolutely right that Europe is a major trading partner with us, and I very much hope that as we get further from Brexit, or from the point of leaving, that on both sides, both ourselves and the European partners, the kind of animosity that grew up from having done that will begin to dissipate, and we can begin to have, if it hasn't already happened, proper, sensible, non-adversarial discussions about how we trade, and hopefully get to a point where we can get back to. I have to be honest with you, we're not going to go back into the EU. That's just not going to happen. But have some trading arrangement which is more acceptable for businesses on both sides of the channel.
I'm conscious if you are much longer, I'll be in trouble with Molly.
I think we're okay. Maybe for we can go another 5 or 10 minutes if you want. I mean, people will be absolutely bored as well, so you might want to go.
Right, is there a last question?
Make it a good one.
See, I'm looking at these two now. We have a banker and somebody who deals with mortgages, and they're trying hard not to look at me. Well, no, you appear to have satisfied them all, young Greg.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And would you recommend people to attend this event?
Absolutely. I think it's been really interesting. I know that I think networking for businesses is so important, the sort of sharing stuff. But fabulous event, good questions, interesting people. Amazingly hosted,
flattery gets you everywhere.
Yes. And as I said, if there's anything I can do to help with any business in the room, or anyone who happens to be watching this later, please get in contact. And if you're not part of this business group, do come and join it, because it's great.
And would you like to come back in 2 years?
I would love to come back, absolutely. And you can write down what I said and say, did he actually do what he said he was going to do? But hopefully I will have done. But really nice to meet you all.
Can you give our appreciation to Greg? Thank you so much. Thank you.